Irene Agbontaen is someone whose career is defined by being the change she wanted to see. Back in 2018, she was working in selfridges and becoming increasingly frustrated at the lack of clothes on the market for taller women. So she took matters into her own hands and founded TTYA, which stands for Taller Than Your Average. The brand saw monumental success, being worn by huge celebrities like Kylie Jenner right from the beginning. However, Irene says it was never about her brand. Instead, it was about opening up a conversation about inclusion. One thing that really struck me throughout Irene's career is how much she built this career block by block. She's now in a full-time job. She still has this business. She's still been really, really committed to her journey and what she wants to change about the world. What I really wanted from this episode is to show how much you can really build your career from a number of different things that you're good at by really just saying yes to opportunities. She is such a good example of that. I honestly just wait till you hear her whole career trajectory and how she's made each decision. I think it's really, well, it's very inspiring for me, and I think that it is really empowering to know how much you can decide your future by saying yes to opportunities, by working hard, and by just kind of saying yes and figuring out the rest after. Before we get into this episode, if you could just go and press the like button and the subscribe button, this really, really helps us more than you know in terms of getting great people on the podcast so that we can have more interesting conversations with interesting people. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
I'm very excited for this conversation.
Me too.
I feel like we're going to have a lot to talk about.
We're going to get into the gist bits.
So I always start with early life. And I would just love for you to paint us a picture of like what early life looked like for you.
Yeah, for sure. I am South London, born and raised, still am at heart. And I think for me, it's been so interesting over the years because I've seen how South London has morphed and shaped every element of my life, if I'm really going to be honest. I come from a West African household. I'm Nigerian. So I always say I'm like UK via Lagos. But my mum's Nigerian, my dad's Nigerian. I grew up with my mum. I'm the eldest of 4 kids.
It's a lot.
And I know it
Society
is a lot.
is run by older sisters.
You know what I'm saying, girl? That's why I feel like I'm a bit of a control freak, if I'm honest, because I've been like a micromanager of like my siblings' life for like for their whole lives. But I think it was, you know, seeing how much my mum worked so hard, and it's installed in me, sometimes good things, sometimes bad, you know. I think her interpretation of what success is very much like, you know, academic, being a doctor, being a nurse, you know, that's a very typical, I would say, Nigerian upbringing. Like success is, you know, equals academic career, you know. So I think for me, also, it was like success to them was also being a hard worker, not necessarily a smart worker. So just like working hard to provide, sending money back home, you know, helping all their family and friends back home. It wasn't about like thinking about, okay, I'm in the UK, how do I build and leverage here? It was always like with a short-sighted intention of like, this is just a pit stop and I'm probably going to end up retiring back home. Obviously, it never really happened. And I think there's still time if she wants to move back. I'm sure she will. But I think it was growing up, it was always the mentality of I need to work hard. I'm supporting my mum and my parents and my other siblings back home. So every month I work and I send money back home. Or, you know, my gran is building a house. Okay, I'm going to work, send money back home so my gran can do that. That came with its own kind of push and pull because she never had the mentality of I'm going to be stable here. What opportunities are here for me? Should I be getting on the property ladder really early? It was just like, you know, we lived in a council estate. Let's just make ends meet. Let's just get by. And I think that mentality with her hard work always kind of in the back of my mind, I always wanted more. Like I always used to me, when I grew up on an estate, which was my first interaction of community. Everyone used to knock for you, like, can you come play outside? You know, everything that we used to see, the people that had money were like people who sold drugs. And like, you know, our community leaders were people that we saw had money. And so for us, we were just like, okay, like he's got a new car, you know, he has always the freshest garms. But the community is what held each other up, and even our style sense of like like CNA and like Kappa bomber jackets and like, you know, rope chains and like in being inspired by like 90s hip hop. I think for me growing up, seeing that where on the streets, on the roadsides, also empowered my creativity. I didn't realize it at the time, but now when I look back, I think it did. But I think that real sense of community of growing up on a council estate, like, and having everything that you need within arm's reach. Oh, my mum's working late tonight. Our community babysitter was a lady called Auntie Wilma, and she used to basically babysit all the kids locally. We all went to the same school, so she was almost like the community hangout spot. Everyone used to hang outside her house. All the kids used to hang inside her house. So, you know, for us, there was that real sense of community growing up, and it was just like, okay, that shifted for me, I would say, as I got older when I started in the workplace, because even at college, I went to SFX, which is a South London college. And I think most of my friends, after we left school, either went to SFX or they went to Christ the King. Those are the two kind of real colleges, South London, deep-rooted colleges where most people kind of divided and conquered. And I think now, like, when I look back, there was like Tiny Temple went to SFX. There's like so many people that came from that real humble South London beginnings. And a lot of us had similar paths because we all ended up at the same college. And even going to uni, I went to a very popular uni. I went to Kingston Uni. But then some of my friends went to Brunel, some went to Luton. So there was that very like sense of community. Like, you know, we had ACS crew, which was like African Caribbean Society, at all the different unis. So like, you know, we would drive to Luton to go Club M, and then they would come to Kingston to go to the works, and like would go Brunel for like, you know, ACS raves. But again, it was just that real sense of community and people traveling to see each other. And I'll be honest, I grew up predominantly in Clapham and Brixton. So I never really saw the race divide, I would say, until I really went into the workplace, just because in the area that I lived, it was heavily Nigerians, heavily Jamaicans. You know, I remember Brixton KFC would be like Jamaica Central, Peckham would be Nigeria Central. So, you know, growing up for me, my school was a very diverse school. My college was a very diverse college. Even at uni was very, very diverse. I would say it's only really when I went into the workplace and you would start to see that there was a bit of a shift. And you know, for me growing up, we didn't grow up with like, you know, exponential amounts of money. Like, you know, we just lived to get by. So as soon as I was old enough, I remember my neighbor come running to my house when she got her NI card, and I was like, Mum, I need to get my NI number. Like, I want to be able to work. And then it was like healthy competition. And then she would run over and knock me. I got my driving license. I'd be like, how did you get a driving license? I need to get my driving license. So we were like very, very like independent women from a very young age, but also equally, we knew that everything that we wanted in life, we had to work for. So retail was a lot of like students' second job. And, you know, I grew up working in, you know, on the high street, you know, understanding retail, understanding like merchandising, understanding how you made something look good for customers to want it to be desirable. So all of that, obviously I didn't know what was waiting for me later on in life, but just having those kind of real humble retail beginnings, I would say really set me up for TTYA later on in life. And then again, like, because I always had to kind of facilitate for myself to work and be able to kind of support myself, I used to like do the door at a club night, you know, and just to get by, make some money, but also like build my network. And I think that was the real foundation for me, where I really started to see the intersections of fashion and music and lifestyle and how they all came together.
What was, because you've painted a picture of a few different versions of success. You've said that success for your parents was like being a doctor or a nurse, and success for your estate was whoever had the money. So you said a lot of the time that drugs were involved with that. What was, when you were coming generally out of education, in your mind, what would success have looked like for you in the future? What were you working towards?
I think at that time, transparently, I was just working towards getting good grades. I wasn't really thinking that far ahead. And I'll be honest with you, I think my upbringing of seeing people come, people go, I lost a lot of close friends, you know, to the road life. So I've never ever really been one of those people that's like, I need a 5-year plan, I need a 10-year plan. I've always never been like that. And I'm still not really to this day. Like, I've always kind of worked with a short-sighted thinking of just like, okay, at that time, success was getting good grades because I wanted my mum to be proud. I know the sacrifices that she had made, and I knew she would be disappointed if at the end of like going to college or going to uni, my grades were just not great, you know, and I know she would feel that personally of like, I've failed as a parent. So at that time, success was just getting good grades, making my mum happy, and then being free to basically go do what I want.
And when you looked into your future in terms of career, did you have any idea of what you kind of wanted to do?
At that time, I didn't, if I'm going to be 100% honest. I didn't. I did like retail because I was using retail as a way to support myself through college. But I was always good at science. Academically, I was always good at science. I did a science degree. I did a forensic science degree. So academically, I was very good at science. And I will say, like, probably CSI gassed me to feel like I really thought that, like, that was like where I wanted to be, like CSI. But it was, I would say, academically, I was just thinking about how do I just get past this moment and get good grades. I didn't think, oh, well, this is my end goal, this is my dream job. It was just like, I kind of like this and I kind of like retail because I was in the retail space, and then I'll just figure it out when I'm done.
So what was your first full-time job?
My first full-time job was working at Selfridges. Yeah, on the shop floor. Yeah, I was doing part-time while I was studying, and then when I finished uni, obviously that summer, you don't have anything to do, so I went full-time. And I was doing like visual merchandising. I was doing stock take. So I would always be in Selfridges when it was empty, which was usually the best times. So I know that store now like the back of my hand. I worked there for 5.5 years. But I interned a bit at the merchandising department. So they used to do all the windows displays. They were in charge of like how the product looked. And I think those early days working in that department showed me about like how, I think it was all about like Lyland Scott at that time, and just like Polonicks, and like, you know, Kanye was having his resurgence with like Ralph Lauren. So it was like very much polo neck driven, and how like you could display something in a way like a baggy polo neck is pinned at the back and everything's tweaked and nothing really looks like how you think it's going to look. Those were the early days of like me really understanding how merchandising and creating your brand and visual identity is important to how well your brand sells. And
when did you first start to realize that you wanted to start a brand of your own?
After I finished Selfridges, I met, there used to be a really big fashion trade show called Bread and Butter. It used to happen in Barcelona back in the day, Berlin and Barcelona. And my boyfriend at the time used to read Complex magazine, and he used to get it delivered to my house. And I remember used to see all the covers. It was like very hip hop inspired, but you know, a mix of like sports luxe meets high fashion. My boyfriend at the time used to get it sent to my house, and that magazine for me was the first time that I had seen music and high fashion really hand in hand. I think Kanye was on the cover. It was very much giving high key, low key, uptown, downtown, right? And I remember going to this trade show, and they had a stand at the trade show, and I walked up to the lady on the stand and I was like, I would love to get into styling. I've just been like kind of assisting and doing a few little styling bits in London, doing visual merchandising at Selfridges. I would love to get into styling more on the editorial side. Do you have the contact for the fashion editor? And she turned around and she was like, oh, it's a good thing that you're speaking to her then. You don't really need the contact. What is it that you want to do? And her name was Anoma Yai Whitaker. And to this day, like, she's been my biggest advocate, my biggest supporter. She gave me my first opportunity, my first job in fashion. And she was basically like, would you come to New York to work for me? She's from East London. She was a Londoner. She moved to New York when she was 19. And she was like, you just remind me so much of me. Like when I was trying to have my first hustle, get on the ladder for the first time. So if you're prepared to like move to New York, I'd love to email you like a task to do. And I was thinking, yeah, right. Like as if she's going to email me. So I was like, yeah, cool. Like I'll email your assistant. She was like, yeah, I'll put you in touch with my assistant and you can just email her. I was thinking, yeah, right.
Yeah, never gonna hear from
she
you.
just bluffing me off. But she did. She put me in touch with her assistant. They sent me some bogus tasks to do. Something to do, I remember, I think at the time with like Levi's and the buttons on the jeans or something, and like researching it. And she basically gave me an opportunity to come and work for her, come and intern for her in New York. And I moved to go and work for her. And that's how I left Selfridges in the end. And I moved to New York, and she was the fashion editor at Complex. And you know, that was my real first, like, starting from the bottom, now we're here job. Like, it was getting the bagels, getting the coffees, you know, prepping all the suitcases for shoots, staying up really late. And I remember being like, like when you're away from home, everything at home seems so much more fun. Like everyone, it was Facebook those days. So like everyone on Facebook was like in Dalston, like having the time of their life. And I remember being like, I'm so lonely. Like there's no one here. But I remember thinking like the reason why I'm here is to learn, and even she picked up on it. And I remember one day we had just done a cover shoot and she was like, I don't really feel like you're feeling it. And I was like, it's not that, it's just that I have a community back home and I don't really feel like I have a community here. So it's a bit difficult for me to integrate. And it's cool that everyone wants to be my friend because I work at Complex magazine, but who do I stand for outside of that? And she was like, I'm going to tell you something that no one really knows. I'm pregnant. Obviously, we work with a lot of hip hop artists. I can't go to them shoots no more. Like, there's too much smoking. Like, there's too much going on. So I'm going to need you to really lead on some of those shoots and like go to events and represent for me. So every invite she would get, I remember like I went to this huge like Run DMC party on behalf of Complex, and so in that way I started to build up my community. And that's why New York will always have like a special part in my heart, because I remember I moved there and I lived off like dollar pizza. I was still paying bills in London. I still had my phone bill. I never really disconnected. So it was like I now became my mum. It's like I was living in New York but then sending money back home just to keep the bills, just to keep myself going, but never really understanding where this was going to lead. But it did give me that real like editorial experience, and it allowed me to like build my relationships with PR, like understanding how that whole pulling works like behind the scenes in fashion. But it also made me feel like I don't really want to work on the editorial side. I just thought there's no money here. Like I don't see this being like a longevity moment. I think it's really cool that I get to work with like, we shot a Pharrell cover and we shot a Kanye cover and we shot a Jim Jones cover. But I like the side of like the unexpected. I like working with musicians. So how does that feed into what I want to do? But ultimately, I traveled so much equally. So also for me, it was like I travel a lot. I like going away with my friends. I never have anything that fits. Growing up, even when our school introduced that the girls could wear trousers, I never had trousers that fit me. So everything was always ankle swingers, wrist swingers, and I would say because I worked in Selfridges, I found a way to kind of navigate my style. It was always men's double XL. It was always like a 36 waist jean, and then I'd get it tailored to fit my waist, but it would be super baggy. Like Aaliyah was like the style guru of all style gurus, because it was like, masculine meets femininity. Am I saying that right? Femininity. But at that junction, she would always wear like super baggy Tommy Hilfiger and like, like an oversized like Carl Kanai jacket or waistcoat. So I was like, as a tall girl, I never had anything that fit. So I would always be wearing men's clothes. And I remember that was the first time that I was like, oh, it's so annoying that when I'm packing on these shoots, I've always got to be thinking, what am I going to wear? Or like in New York, they had like big and high and mighty and like going to these stores that were just so tacky and not cool, but trying to like make it work, And I remember thinking after that, like, I think I need to like start my own brand, but I never had the confidence to do it. So I kind of just parked it here. And then recession happened in New York and they were basically like, we can't afford to pay you to stay here anymore. You need to go home. And I remember before I left New York, I'd applied to ASOS. And they gave me an interview when I came back, and then I went to be the fashion stylist at ASOS. And then it was as seen on screen, so it wasn't the big conglomerate that we know it to be now. But starting at a business that early and starting at e-com business that early, now I'm morphing my shop retail skills. I'm now morphing editorial, and now I've gone into e-commerce. And I would say that ASOS was probably one of the market leaders at that time of ripping off like celeb dresses and like being like, this is seen on Victoria Beckham, get it for £9. Like, this has been seen on Cheryl Cole, get it for £8. It was very much that, but also like the rate that we would shoot in that studio, we would shoot like 90 to 100 looks a day at ASOS.
That's insane.
It's insane. Like, and then the models were catwalking all the models, but it was literally fast fashion. That's where that name came from. But again, I think ASOS now gave me the skills of setting up an e-com business and what that looked like.
So you obviously had the original idea and you had the concept that it was going to be for people who were tall and generally weren't able to find, you know, the options elsewhere, at least definitely not the ones that still looked the way you wanted them to look. And you obviously then went to ASOS. I'm really interested in how, at what point you suddenly decided, do you know what? I'm actually going to do this, because there's obviously a big difference between having an idea. I think we can all get really stuck on having an idea, and we can all go around telling people our business ideas over and over and over, and not doing them is not doing them.
Yeah.
So I'm really keen to hear at what point you actually just thought, I'm going to go for it, why you thought that, and how you kind of leaned in and actually walked with it.
Do you know, at the point when I've really thought that, okay, this needs to happen, was actually working at ASOS, because all the models are tall, and you don't realize when you work behind the scenes just how much everything used to, not so much anymore, I would say, but used to get retouched. So the jeans were never long enough, but we had a technique on a way to fold them, and then they would just Photoshop them longer and Photoshop the crease out. The tops never fit, but they would always extend them. And I remember thinking, if these girls that, you know, are doing e-com, are working in the modeling industry, can't find clothes that fit, then it's bigger than just me, because I, you know, like, I hadn't worked in modeling, I hadn't worked on that back end, but I was like, these are tall girls, these are girls that are just as tall as me. So I was like, wow, there must be, like, there's so many models. And that was the first time when I thought, actually, there must be a market. If I can source out where all of these tall girls are, why don't I just, like, make basics that they can go to shoots with, and they can just have leggings and a long sleeve white tee and a white vest that fit their body, that they wouldn't necessarily always have to, like, retouch. And then I was like, okay, if we shoot all the time, then maybe if I supplied lots of e-com people basics for tall girls, then they wouldn't need to retouch so much. So that's really where the idea, when I thought, okay, there must be a customer for it. When it transferred into me thinking about, okay, how do I cross over? I had, unfortunately, but fortunately, I had a car accident. And when I got paid out from that car accident, I was like, I've always wanted to go to Asia. I've always wanted to sort, I know that, you know, I read up about Guangzhou. It's like the hub. I just thought, let me just go. Like, let me just see. And I used that money. I went to China. I went to Hong Kong. And I was like trying to, like, find suppliers, not very successfully, I'm going to be honest, but I was so inspired because I had been and I had tried. And I remember saying to one of my friends who also worked at ASOS at the time, being like, I think I'm going to leave. I think I just want to just do my own thing now. And she was just like, I work on the buy-in side. Maybe you can just meet with some of our manufacturers and see if they can do your units, because your units are going to be significantly smaller than what they're used to. And I would say they gave me a list of maybe like 50 suppliers, and I would say 49 of them said no, that my units are not going to be enough. They're obviously used to, like, you know, working with the ASOS's, the top shops, the H&Ms of this world, who are ordering, I'm sure you can relate, like they're ordering like, you know, 100,000 pieces.
Half the time they're just like, no, sorry.
Yeah, no, so they were all just like, no. And then there was one supplier who was in Greece, and she was like, I think you're onto something here. I only do Jersey, so maybe you should just start with Jersey, and then let's just see how it goes. So I was like, okay, I found a supplier. Let's figure it out.
Guess we're doing Jersey.
Guess we're doing Jersey. And that's what I'm saying. I never came into this thinking, I remember like when I did my business plan, I had tailoring, I had Jersey, I had footwear, I had bed, I had, you know, home interiors. I wanted to do my own like bedding. And then when you start to speak to suppliers, slowly and slowly, those categories get smaller and smaller and smaller.
That's what's so important though, because I think that what you didn't do at that point is go, okay, cool. Well, it's not what I want it to be, so I'm not going to do it at all. I think that like I go on and on and on and on about when you're starting your business, you've got to start with your minimum viable product, which is like you've got to go to the earliest stage of what represents your business, sell it and start to get to know your customer, because you won't get to know them until you're actually getting to know them, like until you're seeing returns, until you're seeing what they think about things, until you're seeing what they don't like, what they like, all of this. And actually what you did there was like, first of all, I'm so impressed that you took that money and like, and just were like, I'm going to go to this place I've heard of in China to actually like find the supplier. That says a lot about you. But then from that point, being told no and no and no and no, and being given one option, it would have been very easy at that point to be like, cool, actually, I don't think this is going to work because it doesn't look like the business I thought I was starting. And actually, the fact that you said yes to that opportunity at that point is literally the reason your business ended up existing, because you're obviously just like, okay, well, if this is what we can do, let's do it, let's learn, and let's go from there. Yeah,
exactly. And I think at that time, I was just happy that somebody had said yes, and somebody actually believed in my idea. She was like, I think you're onto something. Let's make some samples and let's see how you get on. So I took those samples. I had no money. Like, I was, figuring it out. I had some friends at ASOS that they used to shoot, like, ASOS used to be really great. Like, if you wanted to like do press shots or test shots, they would let you use the studios on the weekends. So I remember being like to the girls, I kind of want to shoot like a lookbook on some models, but obviously if I say it's a lookbook, they're probably going to say no, but can we just say we're doing a test shoot? And we did a test shoot, and I shot it on some of the girls, and I shot it on all of the like really like all the girls that I knew at ASOS that would sell 20,000 units of a dress. Like, my friend Jamie Gunn at the time was like the ASOS model, and she was 5'11". Again, everything was photoshopped on her. So I was like, let me just shoot with Jamie and my friend Natalie Solomon at the time. Let me just shoot with them two, and let's just see how it goes. And I remember shooting a lookbook. My friend was a graphic designer. She made it look all nice and fancy. And then I was like, okay, I guess I got to go and like find some supplier, like find where I'm going to sell this. Because again, I wasn't really thinking, direct to consumer, let me just set up the website, let me just try and find my customer. Because I had essentially been raised in retail, of course, my go-to was like, I need to get it into a store, and no one's going to care about what I'm selling unless I get it into the best store. Because I was like, I'm just this girl from South London who's decided to start a brand for tall girls. Why are people going to care about this thing?
And what year was this at this time?
This was 13 years ago now.
Yeah, so that was also very much within like earliest D2C brands were beginning 2010s, or a little bit earlier, but like it very much wasn't seen as the thing to do at all. Like you had to be co-signed by a wholesaler or a retailer, and you had to, like, that was brand. If you weren't that, then you were kind of some, like, no one trusted searching up a website and putting your card details in and all of that. You were kind of like, oh yeah, it's weird to buy something directly.
Exactly, yeah, it was tough. And at that time also, I remember the supplier had said the minimum units that we can do, like bare minimum, were like 50 units. So she was like, if you can just get a wholesaler that would do the minimum quantities, I can keep sampling for you. We can figure it out. So going back to my Selfridges shop floor days, like their ethos, like when you have your like staff training, their ethos was, we are the one-stop shop for every type of woman, And I remember like from working there, don't get me wrong, I knew all the buyers, like, so I remember setting a meeting and being like, this is supposed to be the one-stop shop for every type of woman. I can't shop here.
There is a hole in your strategy.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
I have the solution.
It's not adding up. So I went into that meeting so confident, because I was like, I know how to get from the service lift on the other side of the building to here. Like, I know what they need. So I went into that meeting so confident. I was pitching to a room full of men, and I remember thinking, they were like, really? Like, tall girls can't find clothes? Is it a thing? And I was like, okay, homework. On your train journey home, when you're just traveling, look to see if you see any tall girls, and just look to see where their jeans stop, look to see where their jackets stop. Just have a look and let me know. And literally like 2 days later, I remember Gary messaged me and he was like, I saw a tall girl and she had ankle swingers and she was wearing 3/4 length boots so her ankles weren't sticking out. What do you need? Send us the line sheet. Then I was like, what's a line sheet? Then I was like, what's a line sheet? Then I was like, okay, I guess I need to put a line sheet together. So it was very much, I was figuring out things as I was going. And, at the beginning, I was like trying to figure out, how this thing was really going to work. But then Selfridges gave me my first order.
Yeah. That's amazing. For Selfridges to give you your first order.
My first order was in Selfridges, and it launched on there. And bearing in mind, all of this time, 2 years has gone since I've graduated, and my mum's just looking at me like, job much, like a serious job, not like working on the shop floor or like figuring things out. Because in between, I went to work for Sharmadine at WA, just to like obviously get some money on the side. I was doing like club night, so you know, this wasn't my be all and end all. Like I still had bills to pay. People always ask me all the time, like, you know, am I losing focus if I'm doing too many things? And I just remember thinking I couldn't afford to lose focus, but I also couldn't afford for it to be my only focus. You know, I had bills, I had like, you know, things that I needed to take care of. So I would work, you know, on the weekends, I would work at, you know, from 9 p.m. to 3 a.m. in the club. And then I'd work on TTYA from 9 o'clock until I had to be back in the evening. So I would structure my day in a way that allowed me to prosper, I would say, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend it because it's not everybody that is built to like do 3 jobs and still like come home and be dedicated enough to write that business plan, to figure out what a line sheet is, to like, you know, build the back end of your business. So I will say I had to work to be able to fund myself, but also like I was meeting customers. I was still keeping up with my community. Like, you know, I worked for, you know, a club night called Yo-Yo, which was in Notting Hill Arts Club for a very long time. And that was really, like I said, the intersection of where, you know, West End back then, you know, it was mixed groups, hard soul shoes. They didn't really play much Afrobeats or hip hop music. So this was the first club night where it was come as you are, express yourself. You know, and it was started by 2 guys, Seb Leo Greenslade, and their resident like DJ was Mark Ronson. So like every night, you know, every week, sorry, it was a Thursday night, the club fit 250 people, we'd have 1,500 people outside. And I was the door girl. So everyone wanted to be my friend so that they could get in. But I remember like seeing brands like Trapstar coming in, hustling, putting in their t-shirts in pizza boxes, giving it out on the night, you know, like we, you know, did Rita Ora's first single. So all the artists used to perform, and then like it was almost like a marketing stop on their press tour. But for us, it was just our club night and we were having a good time. But what that also allowed me to now think about is when I was doing my brand, seeding, like I could get things to people. So even if I had 1 or 2 samples when I was working in the clubs, I could still give them out and distribute them. And then the vice president of Marriott used to come to our club night and was like, listen, I'm opening this hotel. It's going to be like the go-to. It's going to be like Studio 54, you know, in London. It's going to be called, it's in a hotel. It's going to be called The Edition. I want you to come and work for me. And I was like, okay, sounds good. As long as I can work nights, I can work on TTYA in the daytime and then I can work in the club at night. And so we moved from Yo-Yo to The Edition, and then we ran the basement and we curated the nights, and I did everyone from Alexa Chung's birthday party to, you know, the new Cause drop for Jordan and Nike. But then all the talent VIPs would stay at the hotel. So I would hustle the door boys to like put TTYA packages in the room. And then I think Kylie Jenner wore one of my t-shirts. And then that's when it really blew up when I first launched in Selfridges.
At that point, obviously, like that is an incredible journey. And I think that one of like the big things that ties this all together for me, hearing this story from you, is like there was never an opportunity that you didn't take. Like you are very clearly the type of person who will see something that someone else might not see as an opportunity, and you're like, this is an opportunity. Like even you moving from one club night to another and then somehow getting your things in the celebrities like hotel rooms, like that is it's a risk to take. It's an opportunity to take that a lot of people wouldn't have seen the opportunity to do. Where do you think that came from in you?
Hustling. I think seeing hustling growing up, like, you know, like you said, there's always an opportunity. I'd never look on the bad side. I always think, okay, like this isn't where my end goal is going to be, but this is where I am now, and how does this opportunity service me? And I say that not in a 2D way of just like, oh, I need to use this opportunity to my benefit. I enjoyed working the club nights. It actually, like, you know, being a solo founder is quite lonely, you know, like, you know, I would work all days on my own. So working in the club at nighttime was almost my community, and was a way that like for me to express myself and like to connect with other people and like build and they were almost like my nighttime fam, I would say. But also like, yes, there was an opportunity, but I was only able to get that opportunity because I was friends with everyone from the head chef to, you know, the room service boys. Like everyone was my equal, everyone was my peer, like everyone worked as a community together. It wasn't just like, oh, I only need to be friends with the VP and not speak to anybody else. It was actually like the people on the ground. And that's why I always say, like, even now for me, it's always grassroots up. Like, it's always one foot on the ground. Like, what are the kids doing? Like, what's happening on the streets? Like, always one foot connected to community, because that's what's kind of built and shaped every opportunity that I've had across my career. But also for me, it's allowed me to be like, okay, these are the guys that are really going to support me when I have nothing, compared to like, oh, everyone always thinks, okay, networking is networking up to people that can mentor me or people that are in really important positions. But I always say, don't forget the people that are around you that can also support and help you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's really, really, really important. What was it actually like day to day? What were some of the first challenges you really came across?
It was really hard day to day. I think one of the first challenges, I remember my first Selfridges order, my mum drove me to the Selfridges warehouse, which was in Birmingham at the time, because they have a set window that you can deliver the product, and if you miss the window, they charge you. So I was so scared because I didn't know how you deliver it on time and deliver a pallet load of product on time. So my mum drove me, and so when I got my ASOS order, my first ASOS order, it was so big that it came on a boat, and I didn't realize that basically you have to ensure from when the product goes onto that boat until your brand enters your wholesaler's warehouse, you are liable for that bit in between. And I didn't know that at the time. I just thought my factory makes the product and they deliver it to where it needs to get to, sorted. On that journey, some of the products had got damaged, some of the boxes had got damaged by water. So by the time they had got to ASOS, they couldn't be used and they had to be destroyed. And I remember thinking, oh my God, I haven't fulfilled my order. They're going to charge me. What am I going to do? I didn't anticipate having that buffer for this product. And again, because my supplier had been with me from the beginning, so she had done my first order, 50 units per style, to now I'm getting thousands of units per style. She'd seen my journey and she said, do you know what? We'll remake the product.
Bless.
And we'll send it to them, but you need to get your insurance sorted, girl, you know? And honestly, for me, that was the hard slap of business, of knowing that you have to know every element of what's going on, and also never assume. I assumed that it would be covered by both entities and didn't inquire. So now it really taught me the hard lesson of like, never assume, but also just like, I always say there were so many hard lessons or hard times, but I do genuinely think like the way that my life has always panned out, it's almost been like a domino effect. Like one thing has turned into another, which turned into another, which has opened another door. So now like, and it's very easy to say in hindsight, but I do welcome the challenges, because I think at the time when you're stressed out, you don't realize that the challenges are actually the best bit, because they make you a better business owner, they make you a better manager, they make you a better co-worker, and you need those things to happen to be able to morph you into the new version of yourself. So when I look back now, at that time I was just like, oh my God, and I think it was like 250K's worth of product. I was like, what am I going to do? How am I going to cover it? Like, you know, but like overcoming that, I would never make that mistake again now. And I think when you're a solo founder, you do every element of that business. You are merchandising, you are buyer, you are designer, you are marketing, like, you know, so it's great because when you do employ people or you freelance or ad hoc, whoever you need as and when, you have worked in every single department at every level. You know?
It's so true. And I do think that like that part of being a founder, you almost don't want to rush. I think it's really interesting because I have a business course, and I remember like someone asking, being like, don't you need to make these mistakes yourself? And I was like, do you know what? First things first, I was like, I think it's incredibly important for the people who've been through it to share as much as possible.
Agreed.
Because I can help you on 1,000 things for you not to forget, and there will still be 100 that you do forget, that you didn't think about and I didn't tell you, and all of this that will somehow slip through the cracks, and you're gonna end up paying for it, and you're going to end up learning. And like, I think this is why, first of all, this is why I like to have these conversations, because I think as many issues as we can clean up for anyone doing their research when starting a business, that we can stop happening to them, perfect. But like, rest assured, I promise you can read every business book under the sun, do every single course, and like, you will still be slapped in the face like 5 times a week, and you're just like, okay,
having a mental meltdown.
Yeah, literally just like, this is fine, everything's on fire. But it is so true. And I think that you would have learned so much within that time that's also enabled you to be better at every single part of the business and every other job you go into. Like, there's so much beyond just doing that business, that building those skills quickly, which you do so fast for an entrepreneurship, is incredibly important. Yeah,
for sure. And I think that even just learning the fundamentals of just like, you know, I didn't know how much retailers like mark up your cost price. So even just being across that and like understanding the business of retail now morphed into when I started working with talent and music, and like, you know, like now doing merch deals, and like now doing like, you know, behind the scenes or doing pop-ups with artists. Now my retail experience is what has allowed me to be knowledgeable and like have an expertise in that area. So people are now looking at my expertise because I've been through it and I've done it, like, you know. And most retailers at that time were marking up times 2.5, times 3. So I always used to tell my family, like, if you go into a retail shop, like, how you know how much that thing really costs, you know, divide it by 3 or divide it by 2.5, you'll know what they bought it for, and then you can probably work out what it actually costs to make, you know. But then it's transferable skills. And I think now, you know, setting up TTYA and like even going into TTYA talks, it was exactly for that reason of what you've just said, of like, I wish I had more people around me then that were doing what I were doing, that I could ask. So obviously we were like pre-social media age, right? Facebook was probably our biggest platform at that time. But, you know, now it's so easy. Everyone's so accessible. At that time, people weren't accessible. You had to think about, how am I strategically going to get into that event to speak to that person? Or how many times can I guess what this person's email might be? Let me see if I can find their colleague who's got their email on their Twitter page, and I can like try and figure out what their email would be. Like, it was real hustling season, I would say, which the kids maybe don't necessarily have as much now things to do, but that was also part of the thrill and the chase. It was just like, you just have to figure it out. And there wasn't a lot of people that looked like me or were doing what I wanted to do that I had connections to ask. So everything was that I would say I was that DIY entrepreneur. I was like, do it yourself, just figure it out. So when I started TTYA Talks, it was literally a platform so that I could be like, well, this was my first collaboration. This is how they screwed me over. This is what I learned. Your lawyer is your best friend, and so is your accountant. Like, you know, like really like giving tangible takeaways. It wasn't just like, oh, I started my business and we made X amount in year 1. And it was very much like, actually, this is where all the fuck ups were. And actually, this is what I've learned. And also, here are other peers that may not be at CMO level, but are doing pretty well. Here are my peers that can also give you some further insights. And then that's how that was born.
Yeah, no, and I think that's so important and such an incredible idea in terms of like, I believe so strongly that actually teaching people and telling people what you went through, like, it's how I saved myself from a, like, you know, 1,000 mistakes. As I've said, still made hundreds more, but like, it makes such a big difference. I'd love to hear the thought process behind being like, okay, now this is the next stage of my career, because I think a lot of people see their careers as very one-track minded, and I think we can probably learn from you there.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's also important to note that I think it's okay to transform. I think there's lots of transferable skills that you learn from point A that will get you to point B. And I've always, I would say, because I worked in nightlife, I'd always kind of worked at that intersection of fashion and music and lifestyle. And from working at the clubs, the talent used to come to me and be like, Irene throws the Litters parties, can you do my album launch party? Then it was like, then it evolved into, I think I want to do merch, or like, how do I build my brand? You've built a brand, how do I build my brand? So then you think, light bulb moment, actually there's so many skills that I've learned from like building my brand and understanding the logistics on the business end. Actually, there's so many transferable skills that I could put into talent and business. And the real kind of switch over time for me was actually COVID, because a lot of my business, and we're speaking about the real side of business, right? So like, a lot of my business had been through the wholesale kind of template, right? So what that did was, when I did try to push the D2C, people were so used to like going onto other platforms to buy TTYA that I wouldn't really get as much orders through my own platform. Or I always had to think about doing maybe another colorway exclusively on my site that wasn't available in Selfridges or on ASOS to actually get the consumers to come. So when COVID hit, those suppliers over time were doing a lot of the other bigger retailers. So when COVID hit, even before COVID hit, a lot of the times I had to be flexible with my timeline, because if a bigger order came in for a bigger conglomerate, I went to the back of that production line.
Know how that feels.
Girl. So then when it came to COVID, basically they were just like, we don't really have time for these you've grew the business steadily, but we kind of really don't have time to do it in the time frame that you need it in. And obviously everything shut down at that time. And I was just like, I had maybe recorded one episode of the podcast before, like with Leomi. And I was just like, well, actually, everyone's at home now. So maybe I'll just chat to all my friends on Zoom and record it and make it a fun time. And at that time, then, you know, obviously with George Floyd and a lot of that kind of, you know, resurgence in like what it means to be a Black founder, how the Black community are seen in a commercial lens, what the Black community are going through via the corporate lens. You know, brands started asking me to maybe like, do I have an opinion on this, or can I speak on it? You know, we were going through our whole Instagram live phase. So I would join loads of different lives and like have loads of different opinions on things. And then for me, it started to open up my world a bit more. Like a lot of the talent that I had worked with, I'd always kind of maybe consulted with them before, like per project. Oh, I've got this album coming out. Can you help us with this? Or you know how to do this lit event. Can you help us with this? And so I hadn't really formed as a business identity. It just was kind of just like, oh, I'm just like helping this person do this, or I'm just connecting this dot over here. Or, you know, if someone was coming into London, they'll be like, Irene's the plug. You need to call her. She can get you wherever you need, kind of vibe. So then when COVID came, a lot of people were just lost, including me. I didn't know what I was doing. Was I now an influencer? I was on Instagram 99% of the time. I was trying to also figure myself out, like, what am I doing? And it's so crazy because I actually had probably the most enlightened, and, you know, we know a lot of people passed away. A lot of people weren't able to see family members. But COVID for me was a time where I was actually able to stop. There was no such thing as FOMO. Everybody was inside. Everybody was in their house. Everything came to a halt. And I think COVID for me was a real like mirror in front of my face. Like, who are you? Like, you know, you've built this brand, you're helping talent here and there, but what do you actually want to do? And also, how are you going to make money? Because right now, this business that you're doing is not going to be sustainable because none of the factories are open. So we're going to have to morph, girl. We're going to have to figure it out. And I will say with TTYA, I am literally my mother's child. So even though I had this whole business going on, I was always like consulting here, or like, you know, I would do like huge focus groups for YouTube, or go and do like huge like consultancy for like Nike and some of the bigger brands, right? And like allowing them to understand community, or, you know, I'm a tall girl, I don't fit into this space. This is the, you know, you're excluding this narrative, like you need to be more inclusive in this way. So then now TTYA became more than just a fashion brand. It was actually a voice and a platform for me to be like, well, I come from the excluded girl. We're never forefront. We're never thought about. I come from an excluded group. I am the Black woman who usually is in the bottom of the hierarchy pile. What does that mean? How am I lending my voice to that? How am I supporting my community? God has blessed me with the opportunity to be at the forefront of culture with my brand, but actually there's a whole heap of people behind me that now you do have that social responsibility to be able to speak for. So that allowed me to morph into entertainment and it was authentic and it was organic, but also for me, it was a way to make money. I needed to make some cash dollars. And right now, all my factories are closed. We can't meet up. I've got to be thinking of other ways to generate revenue, you know? And it was a difficult time, you know, that first 2 year, that 2 year interim of COVID, if we want to call it that. But it was a difficult time. And I decided to take a full-time job at that time because I felt like I kind of hadn't really figured out the factory element to produce clothes. The podcast was doing okay. The live events of me bringing my community together couldn't work in real life because we had, you know, social distancing, etc. So I was like given the opportunity to take a job to basically do what I was doing for my brand, but just for other people. And I was like, okay, I get to work with talent that I was kind of already working with outside of this ecosystem. And I can see where there's opportunities for growth with that talent. I also get to learn my voice to like be the person that I wish I had when I was younger in those rooms, you know, at C-suite level now. I was like, my title needs to be this. I need to be able to do this. I need this A, B, C, D if it's going to work for me. And, you know, they gave me everything that I needed. They gave me the setup that I needed. But also for me, it allowed me now to have that seat at that table and be like, well, in the last 5 years, I've seen that you've only worked with this kind of influencer. And, you know, not every day doing power to the people, but also like understanding how grassroots culture impacts the music industry, impacts fashion, impacts style, you know. So, you know, being that voice at that table to say, have you thought about it this way? Or maybe you should think about this. Not everybody with 1 million followers is the answer. Like there's actual people who don't have 1 million followers that are just as impactful to their communities, you know? So actually sometimes let's think through the lines. Let's make sure that things make sense. Whereas I think when you work in like really corporate ad agencies or music agents, or like everyone's kind of engineered a bit to think the same way. So like for me, it was just like now being in this social corporate climate, but still being my true authentic self.
Yeah, no, I think there's so many ties of like your story and how you've taken all of these opportunities, but how you've like made yourself so completely yourself, like rather than squashing these different parts of who you are in order to make yourself a businesswoman or in order to make yourself, you know, go and do this full-time job or like whatever it might be, rather than doing that, actually growing all of the parts of you that make you you by taking all of these opportunities and then presenting it back and being like, cool, so I don't fit in this box, and that's the good thing. Like that's exactly why you should hire me, or that's exactly why you should work with me. And I think like that feels to me, at least from an outside perspective, like what you've done through all of these different industries, and I think it's really, really admirable. I also just think that like you're so clearly not afraid to not just take opportunities, but to, as you say, transform and like change trajectory completely, or not even completely, because I understand that it's building on these different things. But I can imagine why lots of people being put in your situation and having the factory issues and all of this would be like, oh no, if I take a full-time job, then I'm failing at my business, or I'm not doing this. Was there ever a point that you thought that, and how did you overcome that? Because it feels like you went into it so confidently, and I just know, I know my mind and I know what I would think, despite the fact that you've got like the most incredible job. And I think it's really easy to let what other people think of us and our own career trajectories change what we actually want.
No, I think for me, TTYA will always be a part of who I am. Like I literally, you know, it started off as, you know, taller than your average, and I am she and she is me. It was 2 in 1. It was a package, you know. And even when I morphed into a full-time job, it was still carved out that I could do my company. Like, you know, they knew that was, again, I am she and she is me, you know? So, but I think it was important that within TTYA, the ecosystem allowed different bits of the business to flourish at different times. So when I could no longer produce clothes and we came back out of the whole, like, you know, social distancing, I could go back into doing live events. But rather than just like making it a closed room, it was more about like, okay, this is now kind of morphing into mentoring, you know, and thinking about legacy of the brand and what that's going to be, you know. It is essentially, I'm giving tips and tools, but also I'm creating a space where there's community, where I'm giving back information, but also, you know, I don't necessarily have the time to mentor 100 people one-on-one, but if I can provide a safe space for them to come once a month, or like feel free that they can tap into this or ask me this or figure out this along the way, then that bit of the business is gonna excel at that point, you know? So, okay, cool. I haven't made product or I haven't done this for a while, but things always come back in heats and waves. Like, you know, I didn't do product for almost 2 years. And then during COVID, I remember going to ASOS and being like, hi guys, me again, you know, so can we talk about shoes, you know? And like throughout that whole time being at home, because I had the time to think, even though I was morphing into this new role, I was still designing a shoe collection because I was like, there's girls like me who are like size 42 and above that don't have shoes. So like now I've got to do up to UK size 15 shoes. And I put out a shoe collection with ASOS and it sold out in a week, you know? So it's like, sometimes it's also having the faith in those partners. And that's why I said ASOS will always have a special, like no bigging anybody up in particularly, but they will always have a special place in my heart because they allowed a space for me to be confident and come with ideas and execute the ideas. I didn't have coins to go and do like shoe molds and design a whole new, I was just like, I think we should do this. You have the infrastructure to do it. Can we do a TTYA collab? And it worked, you know, but also it allowed me to test ideas, not on my own cash doiler, you know? So, and then that still fed into like, now you see the whole resurgence with like, you know, WNBA, and like, we look at like amazing athletes like, you know, Angel Reese, and like, you know, I am almost in awe of those girls because they own that tallness like it was nothing. I'm just like, the confidence that they all ooze, and like they've made tall women cool. Like people look at them and just don't think, oh, there's the big friendly giant, or go and stand at the back of that photo. They look at them as business entities. They see them as entrepreneurs. They're looking at them as experts in their field. They're seeing tall like the third or fourth thing down the line. Whereas I'm like, this is so amazing. Because I'm like, oh my God, there's a whole new pool of women now, you know? And I guess if working in entertainment does give you that access now because you are seeing the other side of the coin. And I think TTYA, I was the founder, I was the talent, I was front of house. So I knew what kind of deals I wanted. I had broken terrible deals for myself at the beginning and learned all of those mistakes. But now that gave me the flex to be able to broker amazing deals on this side, and also like know what we should be asking for. You're thinking about it as talent yourself, you know, you want glam, you want grooming, you're thinking about all the things as if I was talent, or when I was talent, what would I want? And I'm in a really lucky position that I get to do front of house and back of house simultaneously.
Yeah, but you've made that luck. You can see so clearly how much you've like curated a career for yourself that doesn't fit in one box. And I think that it's so like, I get terrified all the time. I'm like, am I this, am I this, am I this? And then I'm like, oh, got to be more like this because I'm technically in this and all of that. And it can hold you back so much.
Yeah, agree.
And I think that you're such a good example of like, don't let that happen. Like, you don't need, unless you want it, you can want that and you can run with it, but like, do not let yourself be put into a very specific box and then say no to everything else around that just because you're in that box. It doesn't make any sense. And I think you're such a good example of someone who's like truly molded and curated your own career. Very quickly before we end, I just want to touch on home ownership because you have very impressively bought 2 properties on your own. That is like incredibly impressive, but you've also shared a lot of that journey. What's made you want to share that journey and want to share the reality of being, especially a Black female solo homeowner? Like, statistically, I know like that's so incredibly important to share and talk about, and like be like, actually it was like this, and actually it was like this. Where did you get the idea to kind of just be like completely transparent about it all?
I think it came from, again, my community, like the girls, my school, I have like, I would say like my creative friends that I work with, and like, and in the entertainment side with me. And then there's like my childhood friends that I grew up with and I went to school and I went to college with. A lot of my friends that I grew up with, some of them did go down the academic route, and a lot of them had properties, 6 or 7, some of them have, with their partner. Some have done HMOs, some are landlords, some are just doing, you know, just had bought their own. But they had inspired me on that side to be like, they kept saying to me, this thing that you're doing, this renting that you're doing, you need to jazz up. That's like, it's quite a Nigerian thing to say. You need to jazz up. Like, you need to like, you need to come onto this side now. So they inspired me. They were always pushing me like, when are you going to get your house? Like, you should save this. Let me introduce you to my broker. Let me introduce you to... And I remember like when I was looking, because I was like, I'm really struggling with a broker. The first 2 brokers that I went to, they were male, and they basically said to me that I should wait till I get a partner to think about. It's going to not look good as a female on my own trying to buy a house. I should maybe think about...
Fuck off.
Well, literally, like they were like, you should maybe think
so
about...
true,
They were
yeah.
like, because you're, if you combine incomes, you know, your threshold of what you're going to be able to borrow is going to be a bit better.
I get that. Like we all know maths, right? You don't need to say it's going to look bad.
And it's more because they could see, you know, like when you meet them, they can see your face, and they can see your
Yeah.
face of them like trying to like, you know, moonwalk backwards. Like, you know, combined income. And they were basically saying that it's not going to look good, you know, as a woman. And then like, again, through conversation, speaking more with my friends and being like, guys, I'm really trying to do this thing. Like, can you help me? Or like, do you know anyone? Can you introduce me? Who's your broker? And they introduced me to my broker. She was a female boss, like badass. She was like, my whole career has been about helping female entrepreneurs, like women who are bossing it. Like, I live for it, you know? And she was very much like, you need to do A, B, C, D, E, F, G. You need to like stop spending so much on Amazon. You need to, your accounts need to be cleaned. You need to like, you know, she was very much like step by step. You need to do this, you need to do that. Let's like work on this, let's work on that. And my first place I bought on the exit side of COVID, and I bought somewhere that was a little bit further outside of my comfort zone, still in South London, but a little bit outside my comfort zone, but allowed me to make the space my space. I gutted it. You can go and you've seen the videos, you can go and have a look at it. But it was, I remember like when I had such a terrible experience with builders, like honestly, like the whole process of buying a house, if that, even just like being let down, like going through properties, viewings, like, you know, like that whole up, down emotional roller coaster of actually physically buying a space. And then when you're renovating it, connecting with like builders and make like, I used to have to like ask my male friends to be in the house when they would come to view, because the price that you get when you're there by yourself versus the prices that you get when you have a male friend present, 2 very different
I'd put
prices.
like a building degree on the wall. I'd be like, this is my this is my property degree.
Like, and like even like working with tradesmen, like trying to get tradesmen to like do a job. I remember like I looked into underfloor heating, and I was like, called a very well-known like plumbing company. Can you come and give me this quote on this? They gave me a tentative quote on the phone. Came to the house. He was like looking around. Was your partner around? I was like, stupid. I used to be so naive. No, it's just me. All of a sudden, that quote went from 700 quid to £3,500. It's a 2-man, 2-day job, you know. I was like, I looked at, and the thing is, I always used to do my research. I used to go on YouTube. I used to watch videos on videos. I used to watch people doing it themselves. So then I was like, no, like, you know, this is the flow and return. You just need to do this. You just need to do that. I don't know why it's a 2-man, 2-day job. He was like, okay, I'm just going to go to my van to like, you know, check in with HQ. I didn't see that guy again, you know. But it was just things like that of just having to always have like a male presence. And then when I did have builders, like I fell out with my builder that was doing my extension. Like I didn't feel like he listened. He was never on site. He outsourced the job. Like he outsourced the job to a third party. He was never there. Like, and my partner at the time used to say to me, like, just calm down. Like, I know you're a micromanager, but just calm down. Like, sometimes in building, things don't go to plan. Like, if they say they're coming today, if it's raining, they might not come. I'm expecting you, rain, sleet, shine, snow, to be at my house at 8 a.m., you know? So there was a lot of that, like, understanding how different industries work. But also, for me, I very much always felt like I wasn't really being listened to, or if I say I want something this way, no, this way is better. But I'm like, but I don't want it that way. I want it this way, and I'm paying, so surely you should listen to what I have to say. But I think my second property was a lot easier to manage because I had so many mistakes and I learned so much about the industry on my first one. And then my second one was just a buy to let. So it was literally, again, another rented. I've got tenants in there now, which is interesting. I'm a landlord, which is crazy. But I also, for me, when designing my second home, I was like, I want to create a space that I would want to live in. Yeah. Like, because when I was watching so many like videos, people being like, oh, don't be too like personally attached. Don't get emotionally attached to your rental property. Like, just do the bare minimum, get your tenants in and make your money back. And I was like, but I remember like when you're at uni and you move to halls and how scary it is, you know, when you move out for the first time. And I was like, I want to create a space that kind of looks like my house, but feels warmly, and maybe not done to like the same spec, but
Yeah.
feels like I would want to walk in there. If I don't want to live in it, that's not a space that I'm going to create. And I feel like that's what the energy that I put in, and like literally it was on the market for a week and it was gone, you know? So I think, again, being a landlord is interesting, comes with its pros and cons, but also I think fighting for your voice to be heard and not be afraid to say like when you're not happy with something. I literally fired my builder halfway through the build and was just like, I know this is going to cost me more money, but I'm not having no one disrespect me, you know? So again, it was just like that constant fight, but also I was just like, I'm not gonna have no one disrespect me. So it's my money.
I know, it really makes
voice.
you, like, honestly, renovating somewhere makes you reevaluate a lot and like get very, very clear on what you are and aren't okay with. Like, it's such a journey. Like, I remember I was like, whoo, it's gonna be years till I do that again.
Do you know what? I did say that when I did my first one, I was like, I am not looking to renovate this. But then an opportunity came, presented itself, and
you
don't
say no to an opportunity.
I couldn't resist. So I was like, oh my god, it's so cheap. The kids didn't want it. Like, I want to take it. So my second one didn't happen on purpose, but I'm glad that I did it. Again, it was an opportunity presented itself, and I just thought, well, might as well.
I know,
Why
you're
not?
good at that. And so before we end, I'd love for you to share the best piece of advice you've ever been given.
The best piece of advice I think I was ever given is, I would probably say, don't be afraid to ask for what you want. I think when it goes back to like my first ever collaboration that I did for TTYA, I was just so happy to be there. Whatever money they were paying me, I was doing maybe 6 or 7 jobs in that partnership. I was just so happy to be there. I didn't really see my value in what I was bringing to a partnership. And the best advice someone gave me is don't be afraid. Well, it was 2 things in 2 parts. It was know your worth, know your value, but don't be afraid to ask for what you want. And because I was just so happy to be there, I was so scared to be like, this is wrong, but I don't want to lose the opportunity. And I just think whenever you do a partnership, but if the 2 people in that partnerships need to have a mutual understanding, and if the understanding is growth, you should both be growing at the same rate. Your business can't stay here and it's a collaboration or it's a partnership, and then the other person's business is here. It's not a collaboration, then it's not a partnership. So I would just say, like, know what you're bringing to the table. Is it your community? Is it your insights? Is it your network? Is it your, is it your design? Is it your IP? What are you bringing to the table? And don't be afraid to ask for what you want. Add a couple more zeros, because you'll be surprised. People always say my budget is this, but surprisingly, when you're being like, well, this is my bare minimum I'll do it for, suddenly more money comes into the budget. So don't be afraid to ask for what you want.
I think that's such good advice. Thank you so much for joining me. This has been so good. I feel like it's it's one of those episodes you're going to listen to it on a walk and come back and you're like, right to work.
Thank you for having me. This has been so fab. I've been like listening to this podcast for years, so I'm just so happy that you have invited me on. So
no, not at all. It's our pleasure.
Keep shining, sis. This is a beautiful platform you've created. So thank you so much for having me.